हो गई है।
Caralho, esse vem feio, bicho. Olha só.
After an intense manhunt, a woman suspected of a brutal crime, killing and decapitating her boyfriend, has been arrested. Good afternoon. This is the KTLA 5 News at 1. I'm Glenn Walker.
And I'm Lou Parker.
Police say the suspect fled to Mexico. That's where she was arrested and returned to the U.S.
Investigators from multiple agencies worked together to track her down, and KTLA's Orange County Bureau Chief Chip Yost is live in Santa Ana with the latest details.
Yeah, hello there. You know, when you hear about the type of violence used in this case, it's something you typically might associate with drug cartels, but the district attorney's office says that's not the situation here. Instead, they believe this was a case of domestic violence. According to the Orange County District Attorney's Office, 23-year-old Elisa Lira of Anaheim was working as a stripper when she started dating 55-year-old Enrique Gonzalez Carbajal. But just 2 months into that dating relationship, Anaheim police were called to an apartment on La Palma Avenue, where they found a horrible crime scene.
On August 25th, 2025, the headless body of a man was discovered in an Anaheim home and sparked an intense manhunt.
The headless body belonged to Gonzalez Carbajal, and the manhunt was for his girlfriend, who investigators believed had immediately fled to Mexico. And last week, after an intense search involving multiple agencies, that's where she was located, before being handed over to Anaheim police detectives at the border a day later.
We recently were able to locate her with the assistance of the FBI, the Anaheim Police Department, the Orange County District Attorney's Office, and Mexican authorities, and return her back to the United States to face 1 felony count of murder and 1 felony count of personal use of a deadly weapon, which is a knife.
Lira is scheduled to be arraigned on February 13th. If convicted, she could face 26 years to life in prison in Santa Ana.
Breaking news, President Trump declaring a national emergency over threats by Cuba. The president issued an executive order tonight saying the policies and actions of the Cuban regime directly threaten the safety and national security of the United States. The White House says that Cuba violates human rights and has ties to Russia, China, Iran, as well as terrorist groups. President Trump said, quote, "The United States will act to protect the foreign policy, national security, and national interests of the United States, including by holding the Cuban regime accountable for its malign actions and relationships, while also remaining committed to supporting the Cuban people's aspirations for a free and democratic society." The executive order also threatens to impose tariffs on any country that sells or provides oil to the island nation. Following the capture this month of Nicolás Maduro, the Trump administration has cut off Venezuela's oil flow into Cuba, crippling the island even more. Congressman Carlos Jimenez reacted to the news tonight.
I think it's exactly the right thing to do, put maximum pressure on this regime that has been oppressing its people for over 65 years. Viva Cuba Libre.
And just today, Venezuela signed a new law to open the country's oil sector for business after being under state control for the past 20 years. The move will now allow private companies and foreign investors to take control over the production and sale of oil.
We've had key bilaterals yesterday with President Xi and also Premier Li. Very warm, very good meetings, just the level of engagement that we hoped for on behalf of both of our countries to develop that comprehensive and strategic partnership that is both long-term and consistent. And made some real progress, actually, because the UK has got a huge amount to offer, and I was able to set that out. And as a result of our engagement, we've halved the tariffs on whiskey and also got visa-free travel to China for Brits. So really important access, symbolic of what we're doing with the relationship.
Well, this was not just a diplomatic trip. It has turned into a political storm back home. Because while British Prime Minister Keir Starmer was shaking his hands in Beijing, lawmakers in London, they were sharpening their attacks. And the accusation, it was brutal. Has Britain gone cap in hands to China? In other words, is the United Kingdom begging for economic relief from the very country it once warned about? It's Times XP, I'm Dhriti Athri, and let's unpack this. Picture the timing here. Britain is battling slow economic growth. Trade pressure are mounting. Businesses want access to bigger markets. And China, despite all the geopolitical tension, remains the world's second largest economy. So Starmer, he boarded a plane to China. The official reason? Rebuild trade channel, stabilize the relationship, protect British economic interest. On paper, it is perfectly logical diplomacy, but politics is never that simple because this particular visit, it collided with Starmer's past rhetoric. Not too long ago, British leaders, including voices within Labour, they spoke tough on China. There were warnings about spying concern, cyber threats, political interference, and strategic dependence as well. The message was clear here, be cautious with Beijing. And now the British Prime Minister is standing on the Chinese soil, talking cooperation. Now to critics, that looks less like a strategy and more like a U-turn. The backlash exploded inside the parliament during the heated session of Prime Minister's question. Opposition MPs, they demanded answers. Why you soften the tone now? Why pursue deals with a country that Britain once described as a security challenge? And then came the phrase that dominated the headlines, cap in hand. Well, it's a centuries-old expression amplifying desperation. Like a petitioner begging for a favor here. Political devastation because perception matters as much as policy. But the government pushed back, and that too really hard. With Starmer abroad, senior ministers, they stepped in to defend the mission. Foreign Secretary David Lammy, he argued something very important. Engagement is not surrender, it is strategy. He reminded the parliament that Britain is not acting alone. The United States engages with China, France engages with China, Germany engages with China. Even countries worry of Beijing. They understand one reality: you cannot isolate an economic giant. You must manage the relationship here, and here lies the modern geopolitical dilemma. China is simultaneously a major trading partner, a technological competitor, and a strategic rival, sometimes all at once. Now, this forces Western leaders into a very delicate balancing act. Protect national security, avoid economic damage, maintain diplomatic leverage. Too soft and you look weak. Too hard and you risk economic blowback. Starmer is walking that tightrope right now, but there was another spark that fueled the outrage. Just days before the trip, Britain approved plans linked to a massive new Chinese diplomatic complex in London, often referred to as a super embassy. Supporters call it reflects normal diplomatic expansion. Critics see something far more troubling. Security experts have warned such facilities could expand the intelligence operation. Opposition MPs asked very bluntly, are we opening the doors too wide? The optics, they were explosive. Approve a mega embassy, then fly to Beijing. It creates a narrative critics they could easily weaponize. So the question is, what is Starmer really trying to do? Step back and you look at Britain's strategic reality today. Post-Brexit, the UK has been searching aggressively for trade opportunities. Europe remains very important, but diversification is also very important. Asia is rising, supply chains are shifting, global growth is increasingly eastern. Ignoring China entirely, well, not an option for any serious economy, but embracing it without question, that is also risky. And this is why analysts describe today's China policy just with one word: pragmatic. Not friendship, not hostility, pragmatic. Talk where possible, compete where necessary, and confront where unavoidable. It is less ideological and more transactional, yet domestically there's a lot of noise. Strong positions, but different perceptions. And Starmer is facing pressure on multiple fronts. Economic expectations are high, security anxieties are rising, political opponents. So every foreign visit becomes more than diplomacy. It becomes a test of leadership, a signal of national direction, a reflection of Britain's place in a rapidly changing world. So in the end, here's a bigger question that few are asking very loudly. Is this really about China, or is it about Britain redefining itself? Once the unquestioned pillar of Western power is now navigating a multipolar world where influence must be navigated and not assumed.
This breaking news is from the United Kingdom. Prime Minister Keir Starmer has backed Trump to strike Iran. Starmer has said allies need to deal with Iran's deadly crackdown on anti-government protesters amid a build-up of US forces in the Gulf. The Prime Minister said the UK supports the goal of preventing Tehran from developing nuclear weapons. This as he faced questions from broadcasters about whether any American strike on the country would have his backing. On his visit to China, Starmer said the repression of demonstrators is grotesque and that is where their focus is. Pressed on whether Britain will support a future US strike on the country, he said, and I quote, "I'm saying we support the goal and we are talking to allies about how we get to that goal." President Trump has ramped up pressure on the country in recent weeks, warning that time is running out to agree a deal to abandon its nuclear program and calling for an end to the killings.
Washington has conceded that tens of thousands of American troops deployed across West Asia are sitting squarely inside Iran's strike range. And this is not a warning from Tehran. This is America acknowledging its own vulnerability, that too at a precarious point when threats, counter-threats and military preparations are rapidly converging. Even as Washington detailed that risk, Iran issued a stark warning. The country's foreign minister has said that Iranian armed forces are on full alert with what he described as fingers on the trigger, ready to respond immediately and powerfully to any aggression. In fact, the advisor to Iran's supreme leader, meanwhile, in a post on X said that any military action from America, from any origin and at any level, will be considered the start of war, and its response will be immediate, all out and unprecedented.
This is a signal This is a warning and perhaps a message meant to travel far beyond the Middle East, because tonight, Iran is not speaking softly. It is speaking through machines in the sky. And those machines are multiplying. Picture this: runways humming, hangars opening, operators staring at glowing screens, and then, one after another, drones lifting into the air. Not 10, not 100, 1,000. Yes, nearly 1,000 new indicted combat drones now woven directly into Iran's military structure. Land forces, naval units, and air command. Every branch now connected to by unmanned firepower. But pause for a moment here and ask yourself, why now? Why such scale? And who exactly is this message for? Well, the timing is not accidental, because across the region, tensions with Washington are climbing once again. Donald Trump has issued a familiar but very hard warning. Step away from nuclear emissions or face consequences. And Tehran's response? Well, not a press conference, not diplomacy, preparation. Iran says that these drones are homegrown, built inside the country, engineered to survive the modern battlefield. But what makes them dangerous is not just their number, it is their purpose. These are not showpieces for parade. They are built to watch, to jam, to strike, and if needed, to hunt moving target. Imagine swarms that can track ships, systems that can monitor troop movement, aircraft that never risk a pilot's life. Well, the war is changing, and Iran wants the world to see that it is changing with it. In the meantime, the army chief has made the objective crystal clear here: rapid readiness, immediate response, overwhelming retaliation if attacked. In simple words, do not mistake restraint for weakness. That is doctrine being projected, and in the meantime, US is not standing still. More military assets are being positioned across strategic corridor. Deterrence is the word Washington prefers, but in geopolitics, deterrence often looks exactly like preparation for the conflict. And when both the sides prepare at the same time, the temperature rises quietly, dangerously. Now let's step back and look at the bigger chessboard. For America, the red line remains unchanged. Iran must never obtain a nuclear weapon. For Iran, one principle is equally firm: its defense capability is not open for negotiation. Two position, neither flexible. You see the problem here, and there is another layer that many miss. Drones are not just weapons, right? They are psychological tools. They create uncertainty because you cannot always see them. You cannot always predict them. You cannot always stop them in time. $1 billion defense system can be harassed by machines that cost a fraction of that price. This is asymmetric power, and it reshapes battle calculation. But here's the question that should concern the world. Are these drones purely meant for defense, or are they part of larger posture? One preparing for confrontation nobody openly wants. Remember here, conflicts, they really begin with declaration. They begin with positioning, signaling, and testing the resolve. Exactly what we are witnessing right now. Iran insists that it does not seek war. America insists that it seeks stability. Yet, both are increasing readiness, and history has taught us something uncomfortable. When rivals arm simultaneously, misunderstanding becomes far more dangerous. One misread signal, one overreaction, one flashpoint, and escalation writes its own script. So tonight, the skies over Iran, they are no longer just crowded with drones. They are crowded with messages. Messages to Washington, messages to allies, messages to adversaries. And perhaps the message to the world is this: Tehran is ready. So the real question is, ready for deterrence or ready for what may come next?